Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching
You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy,
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
God, I assume Tom.
Today I have the pleasure of speaking with IFBB Pro, Jamie Pinder. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm thrilled to talk to you because we've covered the Olympia before on Fanboy Nation for our Nerds Gym section. And December, Olympia is coming back, and they're bringing back Miss Olympia, which is huge for female bodybuilding.
It is, yes. I am was surprised to see that they changed the location. I am really happy to see that they're no longer having it at the shithole at Orleans. Can I say that? Can I swear on here?
You could say that. Have you stayed in the rooms of the Orleans? They refurbished it, and they're really nice.
It's still like, I don't know. Okay, so my first Olympia, I remember I walked into those rooms, and this is before they refurbished it.
Okay.
And this is my first Olympia experience. I was actually still a very new pro. And when I walked into the room, it smelled like, reeked like cigarette smoke in there. It was dark and dank and I just couldn't believe that the IFBB would put their best athletes in the entire world in a hotel that was so disgusting. So for me to see that they've upped their game a little bit again, and they're doing it at Planet Hollywood, I am very excited. I haven't really made a decision whether or not I'm going to go. But it should be a very interesting season. This entire year is way outside of the norm. So to have female bodybuilding back, to be having it in December, and to be having it at Planet Hollywood, it's really like, it's just a completely different year this year.
Nice slip of the tongue with Planet Hollywood.
Yes. You like that?
I did. And for everybody, the Orleans has been refurbished. So, we're talking past experience here.
I still think that it's a crap hole, but it's better. It's marginally better.
Well, Planet
I'm
Hollywood's
happy that he stepped it up.
Yeah. Well, Wings of Strength have taken it over, so that's a huge difference. Jake Wood, is it Wood or Woods? I always mix that up.
I think it's Jake Wood.
Okay. Jake has always been a proponent of female bodybuilding, and
yes.
That's fallen off over the years, and there's a lot of female mass monsters coming into it, a la the old Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman style. What does that say for the sport of female bodybuilding?
Well, to be honest with you, like, I kind of, I have mixed feelings about it, because I feel that women should have the ability to do what they choose with their bodies.
Right.
And if they choose to become mass monsters, then I think that that's their right to do that. And if that makes them happy, then they should do that, and they should go out and seek that. But at the same time, I also know the health implications of what happens to a lot of these women because of the drugs they need to use in order to get to the size that they're getting to. And I don't like to see what I end up seeing with a lot of these women after they've abused steroids for many years. Because it's not good for their health. And many of them, if they don't know how to take care of their health properly and use the drugs properly, they are putting themselves at huge health risks. And, part of me kind of embraced the death of female bodybuilding, because you no longer had women that were striving for a very unhealthy look for women to try to attain. And I actually really embraced what women's physique was in the very beginning. And, it's going to be interesting to see if women's bodybuilding coming back is going to shift what happens in the other divisions. Because over the past couple of years, what we've started to see is that without female bodybuilding, that women's physique kept on getting bigger and harder and leaner and bigger and harder and leaner. And that started to happen with figure, and that also started to happen with bikini, where, because we didn't have female bodybuilding, everything else kind of started to come up. But I feel like we see these cycles in bodybuilding where figure gets bigger and harder, and then all of a sudden everyone's up in arms, and then they downsize it, and then it climbs back up again. So it'll be really interesting to see if the judging changes in all of these divisions because of the reintroduction of female bodybuilding. And I'm hoping that they keep female bodybuilding more of what women's physique became last year, and letting women's physique become what figure has became last year, and letting everything step down a little bit. That way women can have more attainable looks that are not requiring them to ruin and destroy their hormones and their health.
We had mentioned that briefly in the pre-interview, that when you get to a certain body weight percentage, that you stop, you stop ovulating, you stop menstruating and everything else. And with the abuse of certain supplements, shall we say, so we don't upset anybody.
I don't mind upset. It needs to be talked about. When women abuse steroids, and when women when they are too low in body fat, they end up losing their period. And this can, and it's, you have women who are in other more endurance sports that end up losing their period as well. And so that, there's a component of it that does have to do with how lean you get and your body fat percentage. But then there's this other component that bodybuilders have that is the hormonal aspect. And to be honest, like, all of those things are all intertwined. So it's not just being in low body fat, and it's not just the drugs. When you have that perfect combination of both the drugs and the body fat being really low, you end up creating this perfect storm. And then you see with women, there are some women that can bounce back from it. And you'll see women who do really good for a couple years, competing year after year after year. And then all of a sudden they disappear. You don't hear from them again. And that happens to a lot of women in this sport. And that no one really wonders why. And I started to wonder why. And then when it happened to me, I knew exactly why. Because when we abuse our bodies in that way, and we fuck our hormones up like that year after year and cycle after cycle, there's a point where your body doesn't bounce back anymore. And this is also an epidemic that I see with a lot of women that unfortunately come to me to help fix them after. But it can lead to infertility. It can lead to, metabolic compensation, where your hormonal pathways are all messed up. So your thyroid is off, your testosterone is off, all of your natural hormonal profile is completely fucked. And that has this cascading effect in your body. So, a lot of the times these women, they end up, obviously being infertile. They end up, not being able to lose body fat. They start accumulating a lot of body fat. They can't keep muscle mass on. They have sleep issues. And then, all of this culmination of, imagine being a female bodybuilder where when you are ripped and when you're muscular and when you look, top of your game, when you're on all the drugs, when you're dieting really hard, you have all this attention and you have all of this success from that, right? And then all of a sudden you hit that wall, that metabolic wall and that hormonal wall, and everything comes crashing down. Well, now all these women also have issues with relationships, with self-esteem, with confidence, with just believing in themselves. So, it becomes an issue that goes far beyond just their health. This ends up encompassing their entire lives. And I've seen women, especially, God, it kills me to see young women who get fucked up. And they, they're like in their early 20s and they're already in menopause. And, and that's a result from, a combination of being stage lean and, doing show after show and abusing steroids and not PCTing correctly and not taking the right time off. So there are a lot of issues with that. And right now in bodybuilding, there's kind of this perfect storm, right? Where now we have all of these coaches who have maybe done one show, and they don't really understand women's hormones. And they don't really understand how to run anabolic safely with women. And they give women these crazy protocols. They give women really bad sources for gear. And now you also have this ability for people to get gear much easier. So when I say gear, I mean anabolic steroids, right, or any kind of PEDs. And so now anyone, you know, back in the day, you kind of had to have a connection, or you had to be on one of the forums, or you kind of had to like have an in somehow to get drugs. But now anyone can go on Google and Google in Anavar,
Right.
and there's going to be tons of sites that pop up that are selling you quote unquote Anavar. And what happens is these underground labs are actually selling women gear that's not really what it says that it's supposed to be. So women think that they're getting something that's quote unquote safe for women. And it actually ends up being something like testosterone, or it ends up being something like D-ball, or, you know, these very, very androgenic drugs that have a huge impact on women's hormones. And then they get all this virilization, and then you see this downward spiral. So it's just what's happening in bodybuilding right now. It's definitely detrimental to a lot of women's health. And I am going to be very interested to see just how everything pans out this year in terms of which way the judging goes. Because really, you know, if they keep on rewarding looks that require, you know, these crazy drug protocols, then women are going to keep on being metabolically damaged, and women are going to keep on being damaged in this way.
Because it seems, you know, with the year having been what it was, I think we get a 2020 redo after all of this. You know, 2021 has been postponed for a year, and we just start over again in January. You know, a lot of people have gotten smaller. I've seen some people get off the gear and they're 60, 70 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
And these are the women. The men are like 80, 90 pounds lighter. And it's like, you know, what happened to that ninth grader that you just lost?
Yeah.
You know, is it going to go back to like that late 70s, early 80s look, like when Pumping Iron and Pumping Iron 2 came out? Or, you know, what do you think is going to come from that?
I mean, I don't think so, because I think, you know, I really tried to urge some of the women's physique competitors a couple years ago to not come in with striated glutes. Because there's kind of this argument that when women's physique started, we weren't supposed to have striated glutes. That was against the judging criteria. And if you look at, you know, for example, like the look that Juliana Malacarne had when she won the New York Pro, that was like the epitome of what women's physique was supposed to be. And then it kind of evolved and evolved and evolved. And I tried to voice to the women who are in this division that we are the ones, ultimately, us women, the competitors, we have control over the judging. Because if none of us show up with striated glutes, they can't fucking reward anyone with striated glutes, right? So, you know, we have this tendency to say that it's all in the judge's hands. But in reality, if we just keep on striving for what we want perfection to be on stage, and if we as women want to be healthier athletes and want to be able to stay in this sport longer and don't want to have to get like striated glutes to compete and be successful in these divisions, then we have to stop giving into that and showing up on stage that way. And I have to say that I was, you know, when I competed, I was part of the problem, because if you've ever seen any of my competition photos, I was one of the most shredded women on stage.
Yeah.
And that definitely, you know, it's funny because a lot of people will think that because I came in that condition, that it's easy for me. That is very, very, like, so wrong. So very wrong. I remember being at, like, backstage, I think it was my second Olympia, and the women were like, oh, Jamie, like, getting lean is so easy for you. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, I just show up this way. But, you know, I ended up having a lot of health problems because of the way I showed up and as lean as I stayed for as long as I would stay that lean. And honestly, I would love to see how well I would do if I showed up on stage with like my 6 to 8 weeks outlook. Because I'm not as striated, I'm not as hard, I'm not as grainy. And I really think that look is more of what women's physique should be.
Do you think the WBFF does a better job of that, where, you know, it has that look that you're talking about? You know, it's still the curvaceous look, but there's still definition, not to the point where we can shove a silver dollar in your quads like some of your older photos?
Right. Yeah, I think they do a little bit better of a job, but the WBFF always makes me laugh because it's supposedly like a natural organization, but almost every WBFF pro that I know, they do gear. They're all on steroids. So, or they're on GH, or they're on Clen, or they're on something. So, it's kind of laughable to me, that kind of aspect, because, I don't know. For me, if you're going to compete in a natural league, just stay natural. Like, if you want to compete in a league where they use drugs, go to a league that uses drugs. But yeah, I do think that I do like what they've done. I don't really follow WBFF too closely. But I do think that that's a more healthier and attainable look for women.
In professional wrestling, Jesse Ventura had talked a lot about unionizing, and then that got shut down by Hulk Hogan and everything else. And now WWE hires everybody as a quote unquote independent contractor, even though they have a 5-year contract.
Right.
IFBB and then WBFF, they have their contracts, but you guys are still independent contractors. And you had mentioned the fact that if you guys didn't come, that shredded, the judges couldn't judge you on that criteria. Has there ever been talk about unionizing for bodybuilders as well? Because it's such an individualistic sport, yet a lot of you guys also have the same coaches.
I do remember there was talk of it, God, like many, many years ago. Nothing recently. I have tried to get the women to kind of band together for us to have higher prize winnings and for our prize winnings to be equal to men. And unfortunately, what happens is women don't want to speak out against the IFBB because they are afraid that if they speak out, they're never going to go to the Olympia. They're never going to win a show, because bodybuilding isn't like many other sports, because bodybuilding is subjective. So, you do a sport like basketball, you either get the goal or you don't.
Right.
Powerlifting, you either lift the fucking weight or you don't. Like, it's not subjective. But bodybuilding, you could be the best person on stage, but if the judges have something against your message and who you are, they could put you at the bottom of the line and you cannot even place top 5 at that show. So a lot of women are scared that if they do try and fight the system and what the norm is in the IFBB, that they're never going to place well. They're never going to do well in their sport. And I think that's it's the fear that keeps them from wanting to unionize, because I think that they're afraid that if they start a movement like that, and I know that even for myself, sometimes I worry not for myself, but I worry for my clients if me speaking out about how unfair the IFBB is, if that's going to affect the placings of my pro clients or my clients on a national level stage. And that's a real possibility, because everyone knows that in bodybuilding, politics exists.
Right.
And it is part of the game. I mean, I was lucky enough that when I started in this sport, I decided that I was going to look so fucking good that there was no way they were going to play politics. And there was no way they couldn't award me first place at my shows. But unfortunately, that's not how it always plays out for everyone. And I've seen plenty of shows where the person who looks the best is not, for example, the Olympia last year. I really believe that Sarah Villegas should have won that show, but Shanique is Steve Weinberger's golden child, and she got the win. So you still see it, especially you see it even at the highest levels. But for me, I think that if all of us women could unionize, if all of us women could at least come together and say, we're not competing until we get the same prize money as men, they have no choice but to award us more money. They're not going to have all of us not compete. But it would take all of us to do it, to make that happen. And I think the fear is what keeps women from doing that.
I think that's probably the same fear with professional wrestling as well, and mixed martial arts and boxing. With everything else, you have a daughter.
I do not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had a daughter.
No, I have no children.
Okay, I thought you had a child for some reason.
I have 2 cats. That's
okay. Well, they don't have to worry about it, but let's, it's, you know what it is? I think it's because your divorce is so much healthier than most people's marriages
Yes.
that we just assumed that you were co-parenting the whole time.
No, we actually are just choosing to be in each other's lives.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's very rare because
Very.
with me, if I break up with somebody, you're erased from my life. If I see you down the street, I don't even recognize you because that's how much I've blocked you out. So,
Yeah.
I think that's where the assumption came in of co-parenting, because you guys are so tight.
Right. No, luckily with my ex, we had the end of our relationship was a lot of turmoil, a lot of fighting, a lot of drama. And it was a very painful separation. We were separated for about 2 years before we actually got divorced. And we actually worked together when we were separated. So we were still running a business together when we were separated. That whole time was we did not get along well. We were fighting a lot. There was many days where I was crying in the locker room at work. And we went through a lot. We definitely had some really rough times. And then I ended up meeting someone and I moved down to North Carolina. So I'm in Charlotte now. Okay. And when I left, I actually didn't speak to my ex-husband for, I don't know, it was a couple months we didn't speak. And then slowly we started talking again, and he really was able to do a lot of work on himself. And he really, there are few times when you see people truly change themselves to the core. Mm-hmm. And really, I'm so proud of him for being able to really change himself to the core. And he told me one day, he's like, you know what, Jamie, because, I kind of, after we started talking and we became best friends, and now we have this really healthy, amazing relationship. There's a point where I kind of got upset because why couldn't you be this person when we were together? Because we might have still been married at that point. And he admitted to me, he's like, you know what, Jamie, I needed to completely lose you and for you to move and for you to be out of my life, for me to realize the person I was being and the things I needed to change about myself. So it took him a lot of reflection. And then, he admitted that a lot of the things that I had tried to teach him years before about, just about personal development and believing in yourself and just the universe and energy and everything else that I kind of spiritually resonate with and believe in, he started to really get into. And he has a lot of gratitude for the things that I've brought into his life and the growth that, he's been able to have. So it's a really great relationship because I've also been able to look back at, I know that a lot of what I did in our marriage, I wasn't the best wife because I was trying to be Miss Olympia. So I can look at that now and use that as a tool for what am I not going to do in my next relationship? What do I need to do differently moving forward in my life so that I'm not alienating the people that I love in order to reach my goals in life? So it's great because we've really been able to let the experience grow us as people. So I think that a lot more people can do it. And it's very possible if you just admit to yourself and be honest with yourself about who you are, who you were in the relationship, and just know that, you don't need to rekindle that relationship as a romance. But, with my ex-husband, some of the things that we experienced when we were married were some of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. I got my pro card. I went to the Olympia multiple times. There were just so many great, amazing moments that we got to experience together. It would be a shame for us not to still be able to be friends and have a relationship now. So I'm very, very grateful every day. Him and I talk every single day.
That was him texting you right now, right?
Oh, no, my clients, of course. But you know what? Actually, before we got on this call, I talked to him earlier today. So we talk a lot, and we help each other grow still. We really like work really well together. So when we had a business together, we did awesome with our clients. So now, even though we're states apart, we still bounce ideas. If I have an issue with one of my clients I need help with, like, he helps me out, and vice versa. If he has issues with some of his female clients, I give him some of my advice. So it's nice that we're still able to do that too. And I'm very lucky, and more people can do it. They've got to be real with themselves, and they've got to be open to growth.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because, a lot of guys have this fantasy of dating a fitness model or a female bodybuilder or whatever else. And
Yep.
just the added pressure of now competing with your ex, who's one of your best friends, who's also in the same industry as you, can also be viewed as intimidating.
I mean, I guess we don't even see it as competing with each other. We just really see it as supporting each other. Like, I think that when we were married, there was a bit of that. Like, he had been in bodybuilding for a lot longer than I had. When we met, he had been doing it for like 10 years already. And I was brand new to it. So I think there was like a little bit of that in the beginning, but I think now we just really have a healthy relationship where I want the best for him, and I want to see him succeed in every way, shape, and form. And I will do everything in my power to help him, and vice versa. He really wants to see me grow as a person, and he wants to see me succeed. So I think because of all of our internal growth, we really just don't have that issue anymore,
Well, that's great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like I said, I think your divorce is better than most people's marriages at this point.
I mean, my divorce is better than our marriage. Like, it is. Like, we get along so much. I mean, we also live states apart. We don't live together anymore. So that might be part of it too.
That makes it a lot easier.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think with dating within the sport makes it more difficult because you're both so competitive and you're both so, goal orientated? Like, would it have been easier to date an accountant? And I pick on accountants all the time just because it sounds like a boring gig, but those guys have a hard life between January and April. Yeah.
Oh my, I have some clients that are accountants, and that's, especially right now, it's stressful. But you know what? People have asked me that before, like, whether or not I think it's easier to date inside or outside bodybuilding. I think like when you're competing, it's easier to date within bodybuilding, but at the same time, I think if you're both competing at the same time, that's where you really come up with problems, because bodybuilding is a selfish sport. And when both of you are competing, you're both inwardly focused. You're only focusing on yourself. So no one's focusing on the relationship and keeping you together. So you're both just so into your own thing. You kind of lose sight of the relationship. But I feel like if you can have one person competing and then the other person off and then switch that back and forth, I think that's a little bit healthier. And I think there's also a benefit to dating someone outside of bodybuilding, because you don't have to talk about bodybuilding all day. You get a different dynamic. You get a little bit, I don't know. I've dated both inside and outside of bodybuilding. There are benefits and like downfalls to both. When you date someone outside of bodybuilding, sometimes they don't understand the amount of time it takes and commitment it takes for you to compete. And they think that they take that personally. And they think that, you being in the gym is a reflection of you not wanting to spend time with them, when it's really like, this is what you need to do to reach your goals. But then again, like my last boyfriend that I moved down here for, we've since broken up, but he was outside of bodybuilding. He was a fan of bodybuilding. But he like never competed, never wanted to compete. He went to the gym, but he didn't look anything like a bodybuilder. Right. And it was nice because our conversations didn't always have to be bodybuilding. And he understood, and he didn't care how much time I spent in the gym. He's like, do whatever you need to do. I completely 100% support you. So you can find those people who are outside of the sport who will still empathize and understand and support you. Right. I think that really is just very individual. And it's really also, you know, how much of your mate is like, do they really want to be the best, like a really good pro and a really good Olympian? Or are they just doing it for a hobby? And what are you doing? Like, is bodybuilding your life, or is bodybuilding just a hobby for you? Because I think that makes a difference too. Because if you guys both are trying to be top Olympians, if you want to be one of the best in the world, it's really hard to have balance. And the people who are going to be at the very, very top of anything in the world, you're going to be number 1 in the world, top 10 in the world of whatever you do, you're not going to have much balance. And the people that have more balance will be less successful than the ones who don't. So you either need a partner that's on the same road as you, or a partner that's empathetic and supportive to the road that you're on. But I think the most important thing is that you guys both have the same vision for what the future holds. So if your partner's on board with you being a top Olympian and you committing that much of your time to being a top Olympian, then it's going to work. But if you have that goal and your partner wants you to get married and have kids within a year, that's not going to work, because your visions for the future are completely different. So I think that's more important than whether or not someone's in the sport or not.
Gotcha. What is your what next moment? Like, I'll give you an example. So I've interviewed Bob Bergen, who's the voice of Porky Pig.
Oh, awesome.
And since he was 6 years old, Bob wanted to be Porky Pig. And then at 26, that dream became a reality for him.
Yeah.
And then it hit him like, well, shit, you know, I've worked my whole life to get here, and now I'm here. Like, is it over because I met the goal? And his mom looked at him and goes, just shut up and enjoy your dinner, because, you know, you made it, and now keep moving forward.
Yeah.
What was like your moment of, you know, okay, so I got my IFBB pro card. That's great. But is it like, what's next? Or is it like, oh shit, where do I go? And there becomes like this moment of doubt.
So, I mean, the minute I got into bodybuilding, and really after the first time I stepped on stage, I knew I wanted to be a really good pro. I didn't want to just get my pro card. I wanted to be a top Olympian. I wanted to be one of the best in the world. And I knew that very early on. So after getting my pro card, the next step was I got to win my pro debut so I could make it into the Olympia. I made it into the very first women's physique Olympia. That was like my first goal, was to be at the first women's physique Olympia. And I did that. Was that
2012 or 2013?
2012. So 2013. I got my pro card 2012. 2013 was the very first women's physique Olympia. Or no, maybe it was 2012. I don't know, one of those, 2012, 2013. And you know, so I ended up winning my pro debut, and I was part of the first women's physique Olympia, but I bombed. I was like 12th, out of, I think it was like 20 women maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, after that I was like, all right, well now I got to make it top 5. Like, that's my goal. And then, you know, just kept on trying to be better and better. And my goal was always to win the Olympia, to be Miss Olympia. And that's never, I mean, obviously I didn't win Miss Olympia. But in 2007, not yet. Well, and I'm at the point in my life where, you know, I had in 2017, I got badly injured, after the Olympia. I also had a lot of metabolic and hormonal issues I had to fix. I mean, it really fucked up my life in a huge way. And so I've actually spent, you know, all of 2018 was a year where my Lyme disease came back.
Oh, wow.
I was very, very sick. I was in a lot of pain. I had ruptured 2 discs in my back, and I had torn a labrum in my hip, and I didn't know it, because I didn't have the money and I didn't have health insurance to actually know what even had gone wrong.
Oh,
so I lived a long time with a really bad injury and was in chronic pain. And so at that time, I kind of let my identity as an Olympian die. And I kind of let that part of my life, kind of like, was okay with that being like, I'm done with that. Like, I'm on to the next stage of my life.
Right.
And 2019, I had back surgery, and then I had hip surgery. So, and I fixed my hormones. So I'm finally back into a place where I'm trying to get back into stage condition again. But I'm trying to do it without any anabolics. So it's an interesting experience.
Right.
It's definitely different, because I'm going to be doing a guest posing. Hopefully it's still going to be on. I'm supposed to be guest posing at Dragon Con in Atlanta in September.
Oh, nice. I love that place. Okay. Have you been to Dragon Con before?
I have not, but I am so excited to go.
Have you been to any other comic book convention?
No, I am so excited.
Okay, I'm going to apologize from now because Dragon Con and the guys at Comic Con, I don't care if they get mad at me because okay, so Dragon Con will ruin you for every other comic book convention.
Oh no, why?
It is so much fun.
Oh, okay.
Like, any convention you go to after Dragon Con, like
will be
you
lackluster.
set the bar too high. It's as if you went to your first Olympia, and won.
Yeah.
Like, like you turned pro in 2012. 2013 is the first year. You won your first year, and then anything after that, it's like, oh, it's NPC. Oh, it's WBFF, whatever. But it wasn't, the first year I won Olympia. That sort of thing. So Dragon Con sets the bar super high.
Well, that's good then, because I'm excited. Like it's gonna. So I'm supposed to be guest posing at the Quest for the Muscle Nerd.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited. I have like 16 weeks now. It's actually coming up pretty fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've kind of let that part of my life competing kind of fade away into the background for now. I'm not really worried about competing. I want to do the guest posing just for fun, and I kind of want to prove to myself I can get into shape like that again.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly, I'll compete again when the IFBB awards women the same money that it awards men.
Gotcha.
And when I tell people that, almost 100% of the people say, oh, well, it sounds like you're retiring. So,
unfortunately.
But I'm, everyone says it's just, women not getting paid as much is just the status quo. And that's just the way it is. And that's just the way it always will be. And that's the way that it always has been. Well, it's like the civil rights movement. If people didn't do sit-ins, if people didn't fight the system of what the status quo is, we'd still be separate but equal. Right. So I'm just not willing to let someone tell me I'm less of an athlete and I'm less valuable than anyone else. So I really I know that The Rock is having a show. Mm-hmm. And
Athleticon in Atlanta. So
and what I heard is that he's actually going to award everyone the same prize money.
Wow.
But here's the snafu: you cannot qualify for his event unless you do another show where you're not going to get paid as much as the men. Mm-hmm. So I was going to do his show when I heard that the prize money was going to be the same. But then they came out that you have to get qualified. So unfortunately, unless I get an invite to that show, I'm sticking to my guns, and I hope that all the rest of the women in the IFBB will follow suit, because if we all do it, they have no choice but to pay us more, and we deserve it.
Well, Ronda Rousey was the one that knocked that door down in women's MMA. So
yeah, and
she was a headliner and she was a top earner. So
and here's the thing in bodybuilding, they always try to say that the men bring more money to the sport, but if you look at all the shows now, even an NPC show, the majority of the competitors are female. Right. You have more females competing than men now. And think about the money that women spend in this sport. We spend way more money in this sport. Right. So, when I ask promoters why there's such a pay discrepancy, usually the answer is because it's the money that's allotted to competitors is determined by the sponsors. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a sponsor, why would you not want to reward the people who are spending more money on your supplements, more money on your services, more money in whatever you're providing to them? Mm-hmm. So to me, I think that we just need to fight the fucking system, man. it's never going to change if we all just keep on going along with the same status quo.
Right. I wanted to bring this up because I had mentioned professional wrestling and, them wanting to unionize and possibly you guys. 30 years ago, Vince McMahon created the World Bodybuilding Federation. And
Yes.
that was far more of a stage show than just a bodybuilding show.
Yes.
And I think Vince has a knack for bringing something to the forefront outside of professional wrestling at the worst possible time. Like,
yeah.
That's when they started drug testing was, when he launched the WBF, and that's when his scandal hit with professional wrestling. He brought back the XFL this year, and they had to shut down again because of the coronavirus and everything else.
Yep.
Do you think in order for bodybuilding to survive, at least from the female aspect, because you bring in so many more fans, that it could do like a little more WBF, not just the pose down, but, like a little bit of a stage show to it?
I think that the IFBB tries not to do that on purpose. That's a really good question. I think that bodybuilding is, with the exception of coronavirus, it's not going, the numbers are going up. Every show you have more, last year it was a little different. You did have shows that were smaller, but that's because they had more shows. But you do see that bodybuilding keeps on growing and growing. I don't think there's a problem with bodybuilding not growing, and there's a problem with it fading away in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And the industry just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. So I don't think that that's a problem. So I don't think they even think about that they even need to do anything like that, because they're making so much fucking money right now the way things are. Why would they mess up that equation?
Right.
Well,
I was thinking about it from an audience standpoint, because it's like, you have your back.
I don't know. They fill the asses in the seat without it. So why prolong the shows any longer? Like, the shows are already really fucking long. And you've seen where they went from, having everyone do their routines to now, maybe at some shows you only have the top 5 or top 10 that are doing the routines. So they're cutting everything back in the shows. So to think that they would add an extra component, probably unlikely, unless they started separating like the divisions, like, more like how they do like the 2-day shows,
right,
where you've got maybe the males one day and then the females another day. But otherwise, I just think that it's like added time that the judges don't want to sit there for any longer.
Gotcha. What's your take on like the fitness expos though? Because like, the fit expos become huge. In California, we have 4 of them that run in California. So they do San Diego, LA, Anaheim, and San Jose. And, they mix stuff in there. There's the bodybuilding aspect. There's the jujitsu. There's the kickboxing. There's the CrossFit people and all that stuff. Do you think it's better that more people are getting a flavor of everything at these shows rather than just supplements and, everybody?
I think it's pretty cool to see. Like, I know, which one did I go to? It was one out in California. Ferrigno. So I went to Ferrigno. That was, oh my God, that was beautiful. And that was a lot of fun. Because they had some like the obstacle course stuff, and they had some other, I don't know if they had like any martial arts there, but they have quite a few different, things going on. And I like it because I think it just brings more people together. You get to see, people from a different demographic. And I don't know, I like meeting people from different walks of life. So I think it's great to kind of bring all these different people together. The one thing I don't like is I really, really despise the Arnold. I went 1 year and I will never go again. It's just, it's a shit show, man. Like, you can't even walk in that expo.
Is it that crowded?
Oh, it's terrible. Like, you can't even have a conversation with anyone. So even if you go to like meet your favorite like Fitspo person, you're waiting in line for an hour, and then you can't even hear you can't even have a conversation with them, So to me, that like was that was like a negative experience for me. But the smaller ones, and actually like the Olympia Expo, I always have a lot of fun. I always have a really good time. I love the Olympia Expo. I went to the Olympia last year and like, you know, obviously not competing and just got to enjoy it as like more as a spectator. And I had a blast. So I think it depends on, you know, it depends on how crowded it is. It depends on how they really work the whole event. But for me, the Arnold, you know, I think it's one of those things you should go experience it once if you're a fan. But I think once is enough. That's plenty for me. Because March, like Ohio in March, who the fuck wants to go to Ohio in March? Like,
I've never been, so I couldn't tell you.
Oh, it's terrible. It's cold and rainy and windy, and you'd rather go to California.
Well, I live in California, so I can't cry too much about it. But
right,
because Ferrigno has become Legion Sports Fest, and they moved it from Palm Springs to Long Beach.
Oh, okay.
So, and this year they did an MMA after hours event. They had pole dancing fitness. They had the obstacle course.
Yes, they had the pole dancing last time. Like, how fucking cool is that shit? Like, just like really cool to be able to like see different, you know, just different athletes perform. I remember watching the pole dancing, and that was like, those women are no freaking joke.
Right. And it wasn't like stripper pole dancing. It was actually pole dancing fitness. It wasn't what people would expect.
Oksana, I mean, she runs that whole part of the show there, and my God, she is amazing. So talented.
Yeah, and what people don't know is that she's 85 years old. I'm kidding.
Right? She's been around for a while.
No, it's not that. It's that like she's going to be one of those people that's going to be like 95 still climbing the pole. Like,
oh yeah,
we have an Oktoberfest over here in Huntington Beach at Old World, and there's these twins that you know those team ups where they like carry each other's weight and like hold each other up by one hand and everything.
Yeah.
Last time I went was like 3 or 4 years ago, and they were in their mid 90s and they were still doing that.
Oh my God, that is awesome. I love that.
So I put Oksana in that category. Like, she'll be like one of those people in their like 80s or 90s still climbing everything.
Oh yeah. She's awesome. I love her.
You know, you mentioned that you got your hormones in check. What is, you know, can you take us through the process of, you know, or as far as you want to go with it, what happened essentially when you got your numbers back going, okay, all my numbers are completely out of whack, to correcting everything and now being able to balance it without XYZ, you know, medication in your life?
Whew, it was a long road. It was a really, really, really long road. So 2017, the only show I needed to do was the Olympia. I was pre-qualified. So I ended up like, I got into gnarly shape. I got a DEXA at 4% body fat. I literally had 1 pound of muscle or 1 pound of fat on my entire body.
Wow.
So there was that component of, I was really lean for a very, very, very long time, way too long. And then I ended up, bombing at the Olympia that year because I took a diuretic I did not need. Cause I was 4% body fat, and when you're 4% body fat, you do not need a diuretic. So I came in really, really flat to that show, which for me was a huge blow because I, in 2016, had placed 5th, and I was looking better than I looked the year in 2016. And I was really looking to place within the top 3. And then when I didn't even place in the top 10 because I came in so flat, that was a real mind fuck for me. So I ended up trying to push through and I tried to do the Ferrigno right after the Olympia because I was so dead set on getting my Olympia qualification and making it back to the stage that year. And I really looked the best I'd ever looked in my entire life. And to me, it was such an injustice for me to show up at the Olympia, and that 1 hour on stage was the 1 hour I looked my worst the entire prep. So I wanted to at least be able to show off all the hard work and this amazing physique I had spent so much time crafting. And I, right after the Olympia, came home, went to go train legs, balls to the wall, of course, because I'm going to go to the Ferrigno and I'm going to fucking win the show. And I had been on a lot of like anti-estrogens for a long time. I had been on gear for a long time for the prep, and I had been taking diuretics in order to do photo shoots after the show. So I go into the gym, and that's when I injured myself. So what a lot of women don't understand is that when you are completely taking all the estrogen out of your body and you're using anabolics that are making your tendons and your cartilage and all of your soft tissue more brittle, you are at much higher risk of injury. And on top of that, I was very, very dehydrated. So I kind of created this perfect storm for this injury. So went into the gym, ended up hurting myself. And then after that, I tried to push through. And I tried to push through to go to the Frigno, to win the Frigno. And I kept on using all the drugs. And that was even though my coach told me, Jamie, you can't do the show. You need to come off the drugs. You're going to you've been on them for too long. But I was dead set. And then by the time it was about 4 weeks out from the show, it just became very clear that my body was not going to cooperate and that something was very wrong. And you could tell that my body just was fighting the injury. I was in a lot of pain every day, and my body was responding to that pain. So my physique started going backwards very fast. So after I kind of kicked that, really there was no way I was going to show up on stage looking the way I looked. So I eventually stopped, prepping for that show, got off all the hormones. And then usually, after that, after some time, things would usually bounce back for me. And it was months later and I still was not menstruating. I was still dieting really hard. I was still doing a lot of cardio, and I was piling on body fat. And part of that was the cortisol response from the amount of pain I was in, and I was still trying to push through and do cardio, and still try and train. And part of that was hormonal, because of metabolic compensation, because of the hormonal issues I had. And eventually, I went and I got everything tested, and I had no testosterone, I had no estrogen, and I had no progesterone. So my endocrinologist is like, I'm really not sure how you're alive right now, but we need to get this fixed. So it was a really long process of, first starting with HRT, just a general hormone replacement therapy. And then I gradually myself, weaned myself off of the HRT and got my natural hormonal profile back up and running. It was a really, really long process. Literally from 2017, everything's just fixed this year. So it's taken me a good, almost 3 years to really feel good again and to really look good again. Because it was really hard for me to lose body fat. And I felt like I was spinning my wheels a lot. So, it is when ladies, if you get to the point where you are abusing steroids, if you get to the point where you feel like you're spinning your wheels, you've got to stop right there. Because if you have, and that's why I'm such a proponent about talking about this, is because it was really hard for me to go through what I went through. There was a lot of depression. There was a lot of self-confidence issues. There's a lot of beating myself up for even putting myself in that position in the first place. And so mentally it really fucks with your life, and it really fucks with you. So I really don't want any other woman to have to go through what I had to go through. And I really love helping women through that whole process. And I've been able to help a lot of women reverse the type of situation that I was in. But it's a long road. It can take years, and it's not fun. It's not fun at all. You want so badly to have that stage look again, just to even just feel good in your own skin again. And it takes a long time, and it's a lot of patience. And I really encourage women to not let themselves even get to that point.
Gotcha. With all that having happened now, I had spoken with Alex Ardente about his documentary, the SUPS movie, and everything else. And he had mentioned that a lot of the European bodybuilders had reduced the weight, but increased the reps, and were going to failure. So they were working their type 1 muscle fibers more than their type 2 muscle fibers. After an injury that you've been through, back, hip, everything else, did you switch up your routines to go more type 1 muscle fiber and growth that way with much lighter weight?
Not so much worrying about like focusing on which muscle fiber I'm targeting. I really am just like training in a way that's going to give me longevity. So I make sure that I'm pre-exhausting my, if I'm going to train quads, I'm sure as hell I'm not going to start with squats. I'm going to start by pre-exhausting my quads first on some isolation movements. And really like, yeah, like I've really never been one to ego lift and lift really, really heavy. More so like in the very beginning of my journey. But I trained under John Meadows for a really long time. And the Mountain Dog, the way that he trains and the way that he puts training together is to reduce stress on joints, to increase longevity, and to still tax your muscles and to still get, muscle growth. So, I just think that I've always kind of trained in a way that should have been like, that'll give me more of that longevity and that will help me from re-injuring myself. And that's just kind of translated through this recovery. So, the injury came from putting myself into that like perfect storm of being really dehydrated, having no estrogen in my body, all of that soft tissue in between your disc space, all of that cartilage, all of that, that gets really, really brittle when you fuck with your hormones like that and when your estrogen is that low. So I think that my injury was less to do with ego lifting, more to do with, obviously I was trying to train hard because I wanted to get that Olympia qualification. But had I not been doing all those drugs, I probably would have been fine in that workout.
And now with everything else, you're healthy, you're able to walk. I assume the pain has subsided for the most part.
Yes, it has. It's, you don't realize how much pain you're in until you're not in it anymore. I'm very, very blessed that the guy that I moved down to North Carolina for, like, he really, I say this a lot to people, he saved my life because if I had stayed in Connecticut and not gotten the surgery, I probably would have ended up killing myself because the pain was that severe. And I tell people I was not living. That was not living. I couldn't walk. I couldn't tie my shoes. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't do anything without being in excruciating pain. So, the surgery for me was not, it literally saved my life. So I'm grateful every day that I was able to get it and then able to get my hip fixed after that. So I'm healthy now. I'm pain-free now. I'm back in the gym, like absolutely like loving training again. And it's great. Like I just got to here in Charlotte, we're still closed down because of COVID, but South Carolina, because apparently COVID knows borders in state borders. So if I go 20 minutes to South Carolina, I can go to a gym because apparently COVID doesn't matter in South Carolina. So anyways, so 20 minutes from
border hop South Carolina, only into North Carolina. Got it. Yeah.
So I go over this last week, been able to go over to South Carolina. There's this awesome gym called The Office, and they've got great arsenal equipment. Been able to get a couple sessions in there this week. So feels good to train hard again. That's one of the things about bodybuilding that I truly have a passion for, and that's the training. Like I just love to train balls to the wall. It just makes me feel good.
Bodybuilding isn't like combat sports where, there is a certain level of mental toughness that has to go into it and to push to a certain level. Like you got to the last 2 reps and then Arnold would say, and everyone loves to quote Arnold, but I always thought Ferrigno had a better physique, but whatever, that's just me. Maybe because Lou didn't yell at me in an interview, but he's like, once you get to that point of failure, you still push 2, 3, 4 or 5 reps, and that's where the champions are made.
It's very true.
And Muhammad Ali did the same thing. When you get past that certain mile, you go another 2 because all the training is there. The aspect of the mental toughness for you, did that help you more so with the recovery, or was there a breaking point where it just completely snapped and you're, like you said, because you almost gave up and would have killed yourself if you didn't get the surgery?
I mean, at that point, I mean, that injury was way different than anything I've experienced in my life. The amount of pain that I was in, I mean, yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, when I was well in bodybuilding, the mental toughness, obviously that helped me with my success. But it came a point where my mental toughness was working against me because I was still trying to push through and do some kind of workout. I was still trying to do cardio, even though I was very badly injured. And that actually made my hormones worse. That made my metabolic compensation worse. So, it definitely, it worked against me for a really long time when I was injured. And you know what? I don't think that mental toughness, I don't think it would have saved me had I stayed in Connecticut, to be honest with you. It was just at a point where I literally I couldn't do anything without being in excruciating pain. And I think a lot of people who deal with chronic pain, there gets to a point where it just wears you down. And I think I had gotten to that point where, not only was I dealing with the pain, but then I started dealing with my Lyme disease. So being in chronic pain and also having having a fever every day and the muscle pain and the joint inflammation and, everything else that goes along with that, the insomnia, that it just, that's not living. That's just, and I don't think any level of mental toughness really helps someone through something like that at a certain point. I think there's a point where people do have their breaking points, but I'm here.
Well, that's the important thing, because I'm
Exactly.
injury prone myself. So, I didn't gain all the weight just from sitting home eating Cheetos. I mean, I have knee injuries and ankle injuries and shoulder and elbow and everything else from years of combat sports. And so I'm happy I can still walk, thank God.
Yes.
But, yoga's actually been helping with the joint pain. So
Yeah.
I have to ask you this. The first day that you recognized that all the pain was gone, what was going through your head then? Because, little by little, you feel the pain diminishing, but at some point you don't even notice it's completely gone. And then one day you're like, wait a minute, my hip didn't pop. I stood up straight. My shoulder didn't pop or whatever. And you're just realize that nothing hurt.
My recovery was really rough. So because I had the injury for so long, right after my back surgery, I was in more pain than I was in before my surgery. Because from what the surgeon told me, that the nerves were spasming because they didn't understand what was going on. So I would actually I'd be okay. And then all of a sudden I would wake up in excruciating pain. And I actually woke up from surgery and I remember coming to, and I remember thinking to myself, who is screaming? Why is someone screaming? And as I realized, as I start to regain consciousness, that I'm the one screaming because I was in so much pain when I woke up from surgery. So in the couple weeks after surgery, it was very on and off because I would have those moments when I wouldn't be in spasm. And I was like, oh my God, I don't feel the back pain. It's not there. And it was so surreal to me. But then I would spasm and then be in more pain than I have experienced before. So it was the first, couple months was very up and down for me. And it was a rough recovery because I was only allowed to walk 3 times a day for 10 minutes. Otherwise, I wasn't allowed to sit up. I had to lie down all day long. So it was very, very different for me. Because, being an athlete and always being active and moving around and, telling someone like that, you have to lie down all day and you're limited to these walks this many times a day. It was interesting, but it was definitely, even in those first couple weeks of recovery, those moments when I didn't feel that pain anymore, it was I was just in awe. I was so filled with gratitude. Like, that's the only way I can describe it, is my heart swelled with gratitude for, you know, being able to just have that back, to have my life back.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you have your life back and everything else on
Me
top of
too.
it. Before I let you go, you know, this is a very hard, taxing sport on the joints, on, you know, and especially if you do certain supplements and gear and whatnot. What would you tell somebody who is a professional athlete whose daughter is now 13, 14 years old and says, you know what, maybe this is the sport I want to go into? Like, what advice would you give to that 14-year-old girl?
Oh, take your time, tap out your natural potential, make sure you love it first. You know, so many people, they, you know, especially young women, they think that they have this preconceived notion of what they think the sport is. And all they see is the glittery suits and the stage makeup and the hair extensions and their nails getting done and the, you know, the Instagram photos and all the likes. You know, this is a sport, and, you know, you've got to make sure that you really love it, and you've got to make sure that you tap out your natural potential before you even think about getting into any of the drugs or the anabolics. And if you are a young woman who wants to start a family, you are never going to be 100% sure if your drugs are going to fuck you up and make you infertile for your entire life. So make sure that if you know you want kids, that you don't go start fucking with your hormones and fucking with drugs. Because even if you think that you're taking Anavar and you think that that's safe, you don't, like, if you don't A, test your natural hormonal profile, and if B, you don't test your gear and make sure it is what you think it is, you may be fucking yourself up for life. So, you know, just make sure that this isn't just a phase, and make sure that you do everything in your power to be the best athlete you can before you start introducing any drugs.
Jamie, thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you on social media if we want to connect with you?
You can find me on my Instagram, and that is Jamie Pinder 14.
Yeah, Pinder.
Yes.
You know, and the 19 ways to spell Jamie, it's Jamie.
Jamiepinder 14.
Perfect. Jamie, thank you so much for your time. You know, I greatly appreciate it. Olympian competitor, top 5 in the world at one point, coach, you know, healthy, alive, well, you know, free of Lyme disease, and no more pain from the surgery. I'm glad I got to talk to you.
Yes, I'm so happy that you had me on. I appreciate it.